Good evening. Let me ask you a question. How should you, as a candidate, prepare for a job interview? We're going to discuss that real shortly. Stay with us. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Matt Mitchell. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Whyz Hr, everything you want to know about human resources. As you know, my background is as an HR executive for a number of years. Today, directly to Miles, who's a real senior HR professional. This woman is the Director of Human Resources for the wonderful city of Port St. Lucie, my friend and colleague, Natalie Cabrera. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for having me back.
Okay, what we're going to do before we start the program tonight, just as a reminder, our our purpose really is to have some fun. This is our free time, so we want to have a good time, but we want it to be engaging with our audience, with you folks. But we also want it to be informative, so we want you to get something out of it. This is an opportunity for you as an employee, or you as an employer, or even you as an HR professional to kind of get an inside view, an inside point of view from professional HR people as how they look at various aspects of employment. And we're focusing right now on staffing. So our show today is going to have a real emphasis on staffing, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time on interviewing. So I think it's going to be kind of a fun and interesting show. And if we say something really brilliant, you're going to hear a little ding, okay? Uh, but before we get into that, we did have a couple of questions from our audience. They wrote in, and we really like it when you write in questions for us. And you can write in here, but if you do, your name will be published, and we're happy to do that for you. But if you choose not to do that, just write to Dr. Jack at whyzhr.com, and I'll either answer the question myself during the week, or I'll bring the question here and we'll answer it next week. Okay, but we had a couple of questions, Natalie. So why don't you take this last one, which is kind of interesting.
So the question is, what is the best way for me to enter the field of HR? So obviously, school education is important. I am a big believer of practical experience, and I think you get a lot from coming in at an entry level position in an organization and getting just the basic principles of HR and the fundamental knowledge of that, just to get some practical experience.
Yeah. So from my point of view, it was, my background as a psychologist and as a lawyer. When I got into corporate life and I left private practice, when I got into corporate life in a position to open up in the corporation, then because of that background, I was given the opportunity to get into human resources, and it's been my joy and I felt like I've never worked. It's just something that it's just been a wonderful, wonderful experience for me.
I think a lot of people get into HR because they like people and want to help people. And a lot of times it's a lot more involved than just helping people. You're kind of Switzerland in many ways. You're the liaison between the management and the employees. So it's a little different. It's more than just people.
It's really walking a tightrope, isn't it? Because you have to represent management, but yet you have to be on the side of the employees. And so you're right there, as you say, Switzerland. trying to be, and also like Solomon, to be able to have the wisdom to know just
how to toe that line.
How to toe that line. So my background in psychology and in law both have really helped in terms of my working, and your background coming through the ranks.
When I started in human resources, I actually started at a company in Miami, and I was there about a year or two working in HR, and I was an assistant, and we had layoffs, and that was right before the recession. So that was a very different experience and an introduction to human resources.
So there's at least two different ways, I think, Natalie, to answer this question. One is through education. There are wonderful programs now in college for HR management. organizational management or psychology, any of those kind of degrees would really give you a wonderful platform to get into the HR function. And if you don't have that college background or degree, then you could get in as an associate or an administrative assistant, work in the area and get some education. The education is important in this field. Get some education and progress and get, as you did, get different, job opportunities and certifications and then promotions and so forth to the point that now we really have a celebrity co-host in this wonderful lady here. So she's a very important person here in the city of Port St. Lucie as the HR director. So, and she's just going to do a fabulous job over the years. So I know that the human resources aspect of the city of Port St. Lucie is going to be really well taken care of by Natalie.
And if you're not sure about HR, if that's the field for you, then I would recommend, go into a chapter meeting. SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, has local chapters in every city, area, county.
What a good point.
Hey.
What a good point.
So I would recommend, going to some of those chapter meetings, listening to the topics and stuff that's discussed. And it's a good networking opportunity if you're looking to get into HR.
Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent. Okay, let's get into our topic today, which is really staffing. If you remember from past shows that we've had, I developed 12 different steps that I teach HR professionals, 12 different steps in terms of the process of recruiting or staffing, which to me is perhaps the most important function a manager has, is staffing to make sure that they have the right person at the right time with the potential to do the best job possible and to ultimately move up in the organization. So to me, staffing is critical because if you hire correctly, you just feel wonderful. You have just this terrific person. If you don't hire correctly, it can really be.
And it's costly because it takes money to onboard that person, hire that person, and to replace that person.
Yeah. And the turnover to do that can really be costly in terms of finances, but also just emotionally. And it's a strain on everyone if you don't have the right person. So
definitely.
So staffing really is critically important. Before we get into that, let's just take a quick commercial break. Okay. And then we're going to introduce you to our guest today that we have. We have a wonderful professional HR person we're going to bring on and get her point of view as we discuss, especially interviewing today. Okay?
Sounds good.
Well, we've primarily used the DISC assessments with Dr. Jack to hire a number of senior managers, your assistance with this, which to me is really important. The DISC assessment speaks for itself and is proven to be, a very, very accurate tool. And as you've educated us how to interpret it, it is relatively easy to interpret, but I do appreciate the fact that we're doing it in conjunction with you and that you are helping us interpret and dig deeper than we could on our own. So, I mean, the results speak for themselves.
Let's bring in our guest. Would you kindly introduce who this wonderful mystery HR professional is?
Absolutely. I'm happy to introduce to you Tamara Williamson. She is a very senior HR professional. She actually hired me when I started at my current position 16 years ago. So welcome, Tammy. We're glad you're back to join us today.
I'm so happy to be back.
Welcome, Tammy. Yeah, one of the best things you did was hire Natalie. So we kind of have you on a pedestal of how to hire correctly. So you saw
exactly
this young lady that has come to fruition. So good for you. Good for you.
Yep.
Before we get into the actual interview, because I do want to spend most of our time on the interview process because it's so important. I do want to just check the step before interview I have is assessments. And Paul just gave a nice testimonial about the assessments and my involvement in assessments. I am absolutely committed to the value of assessments, personality assessments. My feeling is that many people are not successful, or people that are not successful in a job, many times it's not because of poor technical skills. They know how to do the job. It's they just don't have the correct personality for the job or for the culture of the community of the
Organization.
organization. And so these assessments, and there are hundreds of different assessments. I have chosen one that I find is very easy to administer. I find it gives a very, very wonderful report, a very comprehensive report, a 40-page report. And it also has a 93 to 97% accuracy. So sometimes I feel like Miss Cleo, that I can kind of tell what
Your magic crystal ball.
what this person is going to be doing. But to me, it's so important that in terms of hiring, I don't do it for every candidate, but when a company comes down to, and we have one or two finalists, then my practice is for my clients, and they know how strongly I feel about that, is that we do a personality assessment with them, because we're able to see whether or not their personality is going to fit in, whether they are going to be dependable, whether they're going to be able to multitask, whether they're able to think outside the box, or whether they're going to be really, really good in terms of detail and being precise in their thinking, whether they have leadership ability, or whether they're going to be very good as customer service. All those things are personality traits, and we can identify them with a 93 to 97% accuracy. So
That's good.
a lot of, no, I don't know, in government work, whether you guys,
So it's slowly coming around. We have used it more as a tool to kind of help departments identify, their strengths and their weaknesses and where they need to tap in to, better around their organization or their department. So, as you do those assessments, you can kind of figure out, you can determine if you don't have somebody that's pushing or driving the direction that you need that particular project or whatever to be going in. So if you don't have anybody driving that train, you don't have the right person in the right place.
Yeah.
And I think an assessment helps you kind of figure out where you have gaps.
because hiring is so challenging to hire the right person.
Sure, because sometimes people look great on paper, but then when you are in the role, there are pieces that are
Yeah.
not really what you looked for, what you anticipated having in that
Yeah.
position.
Tammy, what's your feeling? Have you been involved at all in your career using assessments, or what's been your experience?
Oh, well, just to tie into what Natalie is saying, any form of assessment is helpful as the person is going through the hiring process and you're determining what it is you need that person to do. But I think it's an ongoing thing, because I know if I were to take an assessment 20 years ago, I think my results would be different if I took it today. So I think, regularly assessing.
Good going. Good going, Natalie.
So yeah, doing regular assessments, I think, helps people. And in my experience, I've worked with people who have done an assessment and then they struggle with, well, I don't see myself like that. And then it's important to have that follow-up so that you can help them see it. And there's no wrong answers or bad answers. And if you can save somebody from going down a very frustrating path of being in a job they're not really a good fit for, it's going to save the organization money and headache, and it's going to help that person as well. And then it may be in that organization, the individual would be a better fit in a different path, and you can still help them stay with the organization and pursue those other career goals that are more appropriate.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
very good. I had a client actually in Stewart, and there were two brothers that ran a construction company, very, very entrepreneurial couple of fellows. And it was a very vibrant environment. And they were growing to the point that they needed to bring on an HR person, a professional. So they interviewed this one woman, and we'll call her Zelda. Okay. It's not her name. So we'll call her Zelda. And they called me and said, Dr. Jack, we've interviewed this lady. She really knows her HR stuff. She really is terrific. She's a real professional. We'd like to hire her. And so they said, would you do an assessment for us? So I said, certainly. So I did the assessment with Zelda, and I got back to the two brothers, and I said, You're absolutely correct. Assessment of this woman, she really knows her HR stuff. She really is an HR pro, and she really is a first-class lady. But I said, my opinion is she's not going to stay much more than 3 to 4 months.
Mm.
They said, why? Because she's so good. I said, yeah, she's wonderful, but she's used to a very structured kind of environment. And you're going to drive her nuts because this place is great. It's so entrepreneurial. You guys shoot from the hip,
Mhm.
and she get really frustrated with that. Plus, she's a very, very sweet woman, and she's dealing with some construction guys that haven't had policies and procedures that they have to follow. And part of this job is to implement those.
You'd need a strong,
So you need a strong, as
character,
you had said, Natalie, you needed a
personality.
stronger
Mhm.
personality. So I said, this woman is truly wonderful, but not for you. And so that's how an assessment can really help, and it saved them from hiring the wrong person. It saved her from being, and I subsequently worked with her and placed her in a larger organization where she actually was the number 2 person. And she's just been extremely happy as a number 2 HR professional in a relatively large company. So it was a kind of a win-win situation.
like it,
But the
yeah.
assessment really was, so I'm a strong believer in the value of assessments. I have some of my clients that do it for everyone in their organization. They felt even the receptionist is so important to their organization. But
Many organizations now are also doing it as a hiring tool.
Yeah.
A lot of them have you fill out the assessment before they even talk to you.
but because they do cost money, and I'm
Mhm.
always protecting my clients from spending too much money, I always recommend when it gets down to 2 or 3 finalists, those are the people to provide the assessments. Or else,
It
it's
could be
just
costly.
Sure. It can be costly, but it's more costly if you
If you
don't
make
do
it,
it.
yeah, then you have
You
to
have the
hire.
wrong move. Okay, so to me, the assessments are a part of the whole process, and I think a valuable part. So, and again, I would say that I believe almost all of the Fortune 500 companies do have assessments, personality assessments as part of the hiring process.
Sure, it's becoming,
So-
definitely
so-
becoming more and more
Yeah.
popular.
Okay, let's talk about the interview process. Tammy, from someone that's, from an employee's point of view, what should they do to prepare for, I want to talk about the employees, what they should do to prepare for an interview, and then as an employer, what should an employer do in terms of preparing for an interview? But let's start, Tammy, with you. What recommendations do you have in terms of an employee who's looking for a job? Uh, how should they prepare?
Well, first of all, make sure that you read the job description, the job that, or if it's a posting job description, and really be fair to yourself. Sometimes I think people look at that pay range and, oh yeah, I can do that because the pay range is what it is. But I think, paying attention to that and understanding, what you are going to be responsible for on a day-to-day basis, and just be realistic as a job seeker. I think that sometimes we, overreach or are, think, well, why not? What could happen? Well, those why nots can add up to a lot of frustration for the interviewer and can eventually land them into taking a job that is not realistic for them. So paying attention to that, I think, is a critical piece for the potential employee, for the interviewee, I should say. So I think that's where they need to start.
Okay, looking at that job description, really understanding what that's about, and understanding the role that they're going to have in that job description. Okay, great. Natalie, how about yourself? From an employee point of view.
I'm thinking you're always submit a resume. I've seen a lot of applications come through for positions, even in entry-level position or a field position. It's really an important tool to submit a resume. I think that kind of paints the picture. It's the first perception that the employer is going to have of you. Make sure there's no typos. Make sure everything is documented. You're not missing dates. It should be the same as for the application. That should be also thoroughly completed. No blanks, and accuracy.
Mhm.
I think that's important. I think also a good point would be to familiarize yourself with the organization that you're trying to apply for.
Good point.
Know your employer, come prepared with questions.
Mhm.
You want to know. I think that's
Yeah,
important as
because
well.
I think it's a mindset. Interviewing to me is a two-way street.
I agree.
It's a two-way street. The employee has to look at the employer and say, do I really want to work for this company? I need a job, but you got to have a longer term mindset than just an immediate job, because you're going to be spending a lot of time in this company. So the employee has to have a critical point of view and say, do I really want to be with this company? So it's a matter of the employee feeling they're interviewing the company, and at the same time, the employer is looking at that candidate and saying, is that the person that we want to become part of our team? So I think that
I would-
having that mindset is,
I would also add, dress for the job you want, not the job that you have. That's very important.
yeah,
I think coming dressed the part.
Mhm.
that's really, because people say, well, how should I dress? And there's no one, I think your answer is brilliant. Let me do that.
Thank
The,
you.
Dress,
Got 3 this
I
time.
know. I'm not going to go crazy with this. So you have a big head.
Big head when I
You're
get
gonna
out of
get a big
here.
head. But that's such a good point. Dress for the job
That you want.
that you want.
Mhm.
I think that's really important. Okay. Anything else from the employee point of view? I think we've pretty much covered that.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, good. How about the employer? What should the employer do to prepare for that interview? Natalie, we'll start with you and then
Okay.
we'll go.
I think you come up with your questions. I think you should always have in there behavior-based questions as well as technical questions. You want to analyze their skill set, but you also want to know that they have the values that your organization has.
Mhm,
And you can't get that without having behavior-based questions or an assessment.
mhm.
So I think that's important
Yeah.
on the employer's part. And I would limit the number of questions as well. I wouldn't do 20 questions. I would do 10, 12 questions, 15 at the
Mhm.
most.
Yeah, and I'm a behavioral psychologist, so in behavioral psychology, when it comes to interviewing, we have an axiom that we use. It says, past performance is the best indicator of future performance. It doesn't say it's a predictor. No one can predict the future. So our past performance can't predict the future, but it certainly can indicate. So if in my resume, when I'm looking at the resumes that I'm for candidates, I'm looking for someone that has a history, a pattern of success, whatever it is, whether it was when they were in high school, whether they were in a job, and I'm looking for those signs that this person has a pattern of success in making good decisions. And so for me, that's an indication that they're going to be successful in the role. If someone has been making poor decisions, they haven't done well in school, they've gotten in trouble, they can't seem to stay with the job and so forth. I'm not saying they can't be successful in a job, but generally speaking, it's riskier. And so I'd rather go with someone that has past performance is the best indicator of future. So to me, in preparing for those interview questions, I only look for behaviorally based questions. So I don't ask questions about the future. What would you do?
Mm.
I ask questions, what have you done? Give me an example of what you have done. In other words, I'm looking for someone that needs to have a leadership role to drive those projects through. So I'm going to ask someone not, how would you do that? I'm going to say, in your career, what opportunities have you had to demonstrate leadership? So I'm going to ask those behaviorally based questions. What have you done that would demonstrate what you can do for us? And so that's how I would phrase those things. Okay. But asking those, preparing those questions ahead of time, really wise, really wise. Tammy, how about yourself?
Well, I also think as you're preparing to interview folks, that you determine whether or not it's going to be just you in the interview, or if it's, do you want another person? Is it going to be a panel interview? All of those sorts of things. We touched on it last week, I believe, where you definitely want to have, in my opinion, 1 or 2 people in the process. If you're going to do a pre-screening, That's okay in HR as long as you're looking at everybody with the same criteria that you're using, to determine who's going to move on to the actual face-to-face interview. So I think that's a key piece, because you want to be able to be on the same page. And if, somebody's going to ask these questions and then another person's going to ask those questions, however you're going to set that up. So you want to be prepared, which leaves you with much less frustration. And I think you're able to get a better quality employee from that, because you have everybody's buy-in. The department is happy because they're getting a person they like. You're happy because you're going to fill that job. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, that's great insights. Thank you, Tammy. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back right after the break. Stay with us.
What I like about the DISC profile is that it's thorough, but it's not redundant. So it shows me what I need to see. It explains exactly how this candidate would behave in an office environment, how they would relate to their coworkers and their managers, but it doesn't give me so much information that I'm confused. It's also a really great tool, not just for hiring. I can also use it when I'm coaching, or when I'm reprimanding an employee, or when employees are having disagreements between themselves. So I have brought DISC profiles to these meetings, and I show them, this is why your personality would react this way to this comment, and this is why hers wouldn't. And it's just been a really great tool because it's factual, so people don't tend to take it personally, and they're also very interested to learn more about themselves. So oftentimes at the end of those meetings, the employees will ask if they can have a copy of their entire thing, and I'm happy to give it to them, and they're really excited about how it matches up to their personality. They're really shocked that only a few questions can really just see who they are in such an in-depth way. And it's great for when I want to move people into different jobs or different departments, because I can see, would they fit in this department? Are they capable of doing this job? And it gives me confidence to be able to promote or to move into a different department. And then when I've done this with employees and I've shown them their DISC profile, when we have conversations in the future, all I have to do is reference it and they understand. So it's been a really helpful tool in a lot of ways, not just for hiring. Right? I mean, the cost for the DISC profile is minimal, especially when you compare it to the cost of hiring the wrong employee. To onboard, to train, to pay them benefits, to pay them holiday pay, for however long it takes for you to realize that this wasn't the right person. I mean, that's a tremendous cost, both in time and in dollars. So the DISC profile cost is really minimal compared to that.
Thanks, Stephanie, for those words about using the assessments in a much broader sense than just in the recruiting process. Getting back to our interview situation, just kind of to wrap up for tonight, I think one of the things that we have to realize as employers, that candidate more than likely is very nervous.
Oh, definitely.
And that we have to be sensitive to that. We see so many people, especially if you do a lot of interviewing, you can almost become, I don't want to say callous, because but there's a danger.
Desensitized, maybe.
Desensitized, yeah. And we have to realize that person, they're really anxious. They need a job. They're looking for a job. And so we have to make sure that we're sensitive to that and then treat them with that kind of respect, so that when they come, I think that we need to be prepared. It really bothered me when I would see people in my own company, my managers, would let a candidate sit 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes waiting because they were supposed to have their interview at 10 o'clock, and because the manager got tied up, that person just sits out there. Someone should go out there and get them coffee or whatever. I just think that we have to be really careful about how we treat candidates, that they're human beings, they're our brothers and our sisters, and that we need to be prepared so that when they come, we treat them with hospitality and welcome them.
Well, there's also word of mouth. So how you treat that candidate, maybe that candidate is not this is not the position for them, but they're going to go back and tell their
Yeah.
friends how their perception or their feeling that they got from that interview or their interaction with your organization. And if it wasn't pleasant, that's not helping your branding, your business.
Boy, that's, the big picture is
Yeah.
if you're really, one bad thing is going to go to 7 different people.
Yeah.
One good thing will go to one person.
That's very true.
So, anything else? We'll get into more of the technical aspects of interviewing next week. But before we do it, anything else, Tammy, you want to mention as we
Yeah,
end the
just
program?
Yeah, just real quick. From your earlier, when you first came on, you guys were talking about what people can do to get into the HR field to make sure, maybe they're not sure. I'm a big believer in mentorships. It doesn't take a whole lot of time out of your day. And if, and I've had people who I've spent a day with and they kind of followed me around and saw what an average day in the life of an HR person was. Then they ran screaming out the door with their hair up. No, but realistically, and I don't know if our local college has IRSC has a program, but I know some of the bigger cities and their HR groups do offer mentoring, and I think that's a great way.
Yeah, wonderful. We're going to end with that. Nice going, Tammy. Listen, folks, we want you to take out your phone and go into your schedules and plug in next Tuesday night at 7:30 to join us for another Whyz HR. And we're going to, because these ladies are so wonderful, especially my celebrity co-host, Natalie Cabrera, and also our wonderful guest, Tammy Williamson. We're going to ask Tammy to come back. If you can, Tammy, we'd really love you to come back because you're adding so much value to our discussion. So hopefully you'll be joining us next week. And Natalie, we'll see you here, same time, same station. And want to thank our audience for joining us. And I hope that you enjoyed tonight. You found it enjoyable, you found it engaging, and you found it informative. Have a great night. Thank you all.
Thank you.
The Greek philosopher Socrates said, "The first step to wisdom is to know thyself." Complete a Whyz DISC personality profile to really know yourself. Get a 93 to 97% accurate 40-page comprehensive report of your personality styles. You'll also have the opportunity to have a phone consultation with an expert in understanding the report.